We have already learned how to delineate the efficient set of portfolios, but the question still remains that even given the efficient set of portfolios, which specific portfolio should an investor choose? To determine the optimal portfolio for a particular investor, we must know the investor's attitude towards risk, as reflected in his or her risk-return trade-off function or indifference curve. So basically, the missing piece in the selection of the optimal portfolio was the investor's attitude towards risk and return, which is measured by your indifference curve. And these concepts actually come from economics. Their concept of utility theory is being applied over here. So if you look at the graph over here, on the horizontal axis we have risk, and on the vertical axis we have the expected rate of return. Now over here, if you look at this point, let me first erase this. So over here at this point, this is 5% expected rate of return at zero risk level. Okay, and let's look at this point. This point shows a 6% rate of return at a 3.3% risk level. And 3.3, it's written over here as well. So basically, this indifference curve is telling you that investor Z is indifferent between the combination of 5% return at a zero risk level and a 6% return at a 3.3% risk level. So if you offer these two combinations to the investor, you say, okay, so if you want, you can invest in the treasury bonds, government treasury bonds, and you will get a return of 5%. Or if you want, we can make some investment in the stock market, but in that case your risk will increase to 3.3%, and but you will get a 1% higher return. And the investor is like, I'm okay with both options, like, so that means that the investor is indifferent between them. उसे कोई फ़र्क नहीं पड़ता कि आप उसे कौन सा combination दे रहे हैं. For example, let's talk about something else instead of financial asset. For example, for me, Coke and Pepsi are the same. People do find the difference, but I can't even tell them apart. So for me, Coke and Pepsi, I'm indifferent between them. Give me Coke, give me Pepsi, I will be equally satisfied. So you can say that they would lie on the same indifference curve for me, because I'm equally satisfied with either of them. But for me, I am more satisfied when I get fresh juices. So fresh juice will be on a higher indifference curve, because if I get a fresh juice, I will be more satisfied. So basically, one indifference curve shows one satisfaction level, and different investors actually have a map of utility of indifference curves. So everybody has a unique map depending upon their own preferences, which you will look at in a later video, that how is the map constructed. Not constructed, how does the map look like, because we're not going to go into so much detail. Now let's look at the indifference curve of investor Y. So your investor Y is also okay with a 5% riskless return, or this investor wants approximately, I can say 7.5%, yeah, 7.5% return at a 3.3% risk level. So this investor is not satisfied. Investor Y is basically not satisfied if he gets just a 6% return. For a 3.3% risk level, investor Y wants a 7.5% return. So this investor is equally satisfied if he gets a 5% return, riskless return, or a 7.5% return for bearing a 3.3% risk level. So this means that this investor is asking for a higher risk premium. And we have already discussed that the risk premium is a measure of risk aversion. So since this investor requires a higher risk premium, that means that this investor is more risk averse. So as the slope of your indifference curve increases, so as you go inside, it means that the risk aversion is increasing of that investor. So if we have another investor, let's say investor X. So in that case, this investor X has a higher slope, which means he demands even a more higher risk premium. So he will be more risk averse. So as a generalization, the steeper the slope of an investor's indifference curve, the more risk averse will be the investor. But remember that each individual has a map of indifference curves which is unique to that investor. Okay, so now we're going to take this indifference curve with the efficient set and we're going to combine both of them. So this is how you select the optimal portfolio. This is your efficient set in the 2-asset case, right? Because you can see there is no shaded area. So that means it's not talking about multiple assets, it's talking about only 2 assets. And over here you can see that we have a map of indifference curve. So this is what I was talking about earlier, that every investor will have a unique map. So the map of investor Y is over here, the blue one, and the higher indifference curve actually shows a higher level of satisfaction. So compared to if the investor is on Y1, he will be satisfied, but if the investor can move to Y2, so any point, any combination on the Y2, he will be more satisfied. And similarly, if the investor can move to Y3, he will be even more satisfied. And same goes for your investor Z. Now which point should be selected over here? I'm going to erase the points that I have written. The point where your indifference curve is tangent to the efficient frontier, that is the optimum point of selection. So that is over here for investor Y, and that point is over here for investor Z. So the optimal portfolio for each investor is found at the tangency point between the efficient set of portfolios and one of the investor's indifference curve. This tangency point marks the highest level of satisfaction the investor can attain. So basically, they will be more satisfied if they are at this curve. But you can see that the efficient set is still here. So actually, that portfolio combination is not available that can take you to the third level, right? For example, let's think about it this way. Even your resources can limit your attainable set. For example, I want to purchase the latest model of iPhone, right? But I don't have the money to purchase it. So it's out of my attainable set, right? It can't be in my efficient because I don't even have the resources to purchase it right now. So my next best alternative might be if I get a Samsung Note or at least a older model of Samsung Note, then because I have enough cash, then that is attainable for me. So this is the same thing. They will be more satisfied at the third indifference curve, but that is something that they cannot get because the efficient set is over here. So that combination, if the efficient set would have been somewhere over here like this, so maybe they could have gone to the higher level. सब कुछ चीज़ available ही नहीं है तो you can't attain it. Okay, so now let's see once again that your investor Y, right? Now let's go back. Remember, your investor Y was more risk averse. So your investor Y will select the portfolio that gives a 6% rate of return and a 4.2% risk. Whereas investor Z was less risk averse. So this investor is ready to take on more risk. This investor is saying, okay, I can take 7 point 1% risk if you give me a 7.2% return. See the difference? Now, the efficient set is the same, but because your investor Y was more risk averse, so let's go back. Because he was more risk averse, that's why over here he is like, okay, for me, I don't want that high return. I am satisfied if you give me a 6% return level at a risk of 4.2. This investor doesn't want to take on the extra risk, but investor Z was less risk averse, so this investor is ready to take on more risk in the hope of getting a higher return. So based on this, Miss Terwei's portfolio is more heavily weighted with less risky securities, while Mr. Z's portfolios will contain a larger portfolio of the more risky security.